Good afternoon, guys. We'll get started in just a minute here, given some time for others to join, but thanks for tuning in. Feel free to put any of your questions you might have in the chat or the Q&A section. I will get to as many as I can at the end of the presentation. All right, guys, we'll get started in just a second. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I know people are trying to enjoy August recess. Whether it's a recess or not is still TBD. A lot of work to be done in hemp, but want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So we'll get started here right at 4, and then I'll try to keep as much time as I can for questions at the end, which you can submit in the Q&A section, or I believe the chat has been activated. But if that's not working, the Q&A section has been very reliable the last few webinars. All right, we're gonna jump into it here. Thank you guys for joining. It is somehow the third Thursday in August already. I know a lot of people were looking forward to August recess. Recess has a different definition apparently. When we're working in government affairs and working on a Senate CR and then expecting a vote on the House from the House in September here. So a lot of work is still being done. Just left a strategy meeting with a number of our partners on the wholesale and retailer side. So there's a lot of good work still being done during our quote unquote recess. But we'll kick off this particular meeting talking quite a lot about our strategy moving forward September through December. As many of you know, because we do have some repeat visitors here, we will not be able to share all strategy details. I highly recommend you join associations that share these with their members on their internal calls, but we will be sharing kind of what's happening, share some expectations so that people can best prepare and understand kind of where the market is and what people are experiencing right now. So with that, we will kick off today in THC Beverage, our monthly webinar for August 2026. We do have some new people who are joining us for the first time. And for those of you who are new to the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives, my name is Diana Eberlein. I am the chair of the coalition. We were created about 2 years ago to focus specifically on federal policy, codifying low-dose THC beverages, hemp-derived THC beverages, I should say, and having them regulated like alcohol. Very similar pillars to what you see in the alcohol industry, but we've always said that our target demographic is the adult beverage consumer. And how do we reach adult beverage consumers? By putting our products alongside other adult beverages and utilizing the same infrastructure that has created the safest alcohol regulatory framework in the world. The United States has the safest regulatory framework for alcohol and cleaning up illicit, or in this case, you would call it like counterfeit alcohol in the United States. And that's because of the 3-tier system. So we advocate and educate alongside of our other esteemed partners on the Hill in DC to push forward sensible regulation that puts consumer safety first, as well as some guardrails in place so that adult consumers have safe access to safe products that are appropriately dosed, labeled, and of course marketed and track and trace, if you will. So we'll jump right into this, and I'm going to adjust my window here so I can see everything. We're going to jump right into what's been going on the last couple weeks. And I think a lot of us were up pretty late watching a Senate vote not too long ago. We've made some progress, but we are not done. It is important that while we are focused on a 30-day extension and getting that included into the CR or the continuing renewal, that our goal is ultimately to see regulation get across the line. Showing that dedication, showing solutions that can work to create a safe infrastructure for the consumer and address the issues that Congress has are incredibly important. But what we saw at the beginning of the month, when August recess was supposed to start, was incredibly overwhelming support for regulation and, more importantly, not prohibition in this case. I think it's very important for people to understand that closing the loophole, if you will, while I think we all understand that the intent maybe of the 2018 Farm Bill was not necessarily to legalize intoxicating hemp-derived THC products, this is where we're at. And you cannot regulate away demand, and the consumers want these products. As a result, we are proposing that rather than support prohibition, which we know doesn't work, let's look at sensible regulation and options that allow us to address the concerns of Congress, the consumers, and also allow for the state programs that have been created as a result of the 2018 Farm Bill to continue to thrive and operate responsibly. So the beginning of the month, we saw a lot of things that were happening. I've never watched Twitter or X more in my life for rapid updates of support for our industry, but there was a lot of things that helped us get the votes that we needed to not only see the Senate CR include the hemp extension, but then to see the Senate CR pass with a 90-6 vote. So I think the one that was heard loudest, if you will, was Dr. Oz sent a letter to senators asking them to reject the Senator Budd hemp amendment, which was asking to strip out the extension clause that was initially included. We saw Senator Ted Cruz post that he was saying, hey, we need regulation. Naturally derived products can be regulated, and we need to look at common sense regulation moving forward versus prohibition. We saw letters from veterans, alcohol industry stakeholders, other groups basically saying regulation is the pathway forward. Give us more time to get us beyond the midterm elections to get that regulation and propose that regulation to be considered by Congress. Congress needs more time was ultimately our messaging. During this period, over the last couple months, you guys were busy. Over 200,000 hemp beverage letters, specifically about hemp beverage and wanting access to these products, were sent to Congress by constituents. That's amazing. That's the kind of volume that gets members of Congress going, our constituents care about this. That means that could impact their votes in their election, which obviously in an election year is particularly important. So keep up the good work. We need that momentum because, again, we're not done. But those letters definitely turned some heads. And we heard a lot about this on the Hill in particular when we were having conversations around the Senate CR. There was also a letter that had 98 nonprofits supporting the hemp extension, again, pushing for giving us time to get a sensible regulation introduced and across the line. The 30 days is not necessarily enough time per se to get a full comprehensive bill over the line. We'll talk about that in a little bit in more depth, but it is a critical indicator that there is interest in Congress by regulators, policymakers, as well as the market itself to get regulation over the line, and that we have been heard loud and clear to be one of the last standing issues to be discussed during a Senate CR vote that literally pushed a vote till 3:30 in the morning, having JD Vance having meetings with senators on this issue because of the CMS program. That is an incredible feat, and we've come such a long way. So I'm so glad that we have this win while we still have more work to do, because it shows that the work we're doing is paying off. I do want to make it clear, though, while we had incredible results in terms of that vote, candidly, I expected it to be a lot closer when it came to that Butt Amendment. There were hundreds and thousands of text messages. I actually counted on August 1st, which was when we first were hearing rumors of whether or not the hemp extension was still included in the CR language before it was introduced by the Senate. I sent 532 text messages that day. And I know there's other people who were just as active as I was. So over the that August 1st to August 8th before the vote, over 3,500 text messages, not to mention the number of calls and the crazy hours that we were all working. So I know a lot of those people are on this call. Thank you for all of the work you have been doing. And again, I'm so glad that we have seen an indication that we have been heard and that people have an interest in doing this and getting regulation across. But it is important that even though we got that vote, there are many reasons why someone may vote one reason or another. For example, there are some champions of hemp that have been very vocal that did not vote in our favor. There are also people that have been kind of vocally against intoxicating hemp in the past, but voted to pass the CR and didn't want to, have the Bud or approve Bud's amendment. There's many reasons and factors that impact votes at any given time. We've talked a lot about the fact that, I mean, look, it was 3:30 in the morning. Some people just wanted to probably go home. So that can impact how people vote. At the end of the day, we need to understand that one vote doesn't guarantee a future vote. So when we're looking at the House, even though we've had a number of champions in the House be very vocal about hemp, we need to make sure they understand how this language impacts our industry and how it plays into the CR. We need to make sure that when we're introducing legislation that people understand the impact of the legislation, that they understand what the three-tier system is, because we want to guarantee a future vote, not just assume that because they voted with us this past Senate CR or past other experiences that they are still on board. There are many times the reason someone votes a certain way is because of the last person that they spoke to or the most impactful thing that they've recently heard. We know, unfortunately, how impactful those posters of Stonios and, 1,000-milligram gummies can be when it comes to, look, we got to clean up the marketplace. We agree. We want to clean up the marketplace too. We want to get rid of the synthetics and the really high dose product that is marketing to kids. We want to get rid of those things too. But as you can imagine, when someone holds up that poster board on the Senate floor, it can be very easy to change someone's mind if we aren't impactful enough or persuasive enough or at providing enough educational value in our conversations. But our take on this vote and how it played out is that there's an indicator from this administration and Congress that they want regulation. I think they know that prohibition does not work. We know this through alcohol. No one knows it better than some of our partners on the alcohol side. We need time to address this. We need to get through the midterm election. So that's really what the 30 days gives us. It's not about kicking the can down the road. We don't want to kick the can down the road either. We want clarity. We want stability. We want to be able to build a future, not just staying alive and buying 3 months, 6 months, 1 year at a time. We want stable supply chains. We want wholesalers that maybe haven't entered the space yet to be confident in entering the marketplace, that they understand where the product is being, where the hemp is being derived from, how it's being manufactured, how it's being distributed. We want the consumer to continue building trust and have access to these products in other markets. The only way we do that is by getting federal clarity and by getting stability for our marketplace. So we need to keep applying the pressure. All of the work that you have been doing over the past, few months, and particularly over the last 4 weeks, keep it up. We are being heard very loud and clear, and we are seeing the results of that. And I hope that feels really good, because that, I think, continues to motivate people to engage and to participate and support the market. Leveraging our strengths. We have some amazing partners and we have amazing political capital, some of which has been somewhat untapped. because some people focus more so on the state level activity than they do federal. But now there's policy urgency, and we need to kind of keep all of those working together. I particularly like this image with the gear because I was thinking as we were tackling different hurdles over the last couple weeks, all of these associations and brand partners have different relationships that they can tap into. So when we would get a text saying, hey, does anyone know how this office is? Or has anyone spoken to so-and-so? We were able to kind of turn this gear and say, hey, Total Wine has a great relationship there. Let's see what information they have. And communicating and sharing. That is what this is all about. We would not be where we are today at getting this extension if it was not for our wholesale and retail partners. They've played such a critical role in the recent momentum, on top of bringing legitimacy to the industry and the category that we have been obviously championing. It's great to have them echoing what we are saying because it hits different when it comes from WSWA or NACS or ABL and these groups that have existed for 100 years and work in a very regulated marketplace. We need to continue getting our state associations activated. There's still a number of groups that are confused by the fact that they have state regulations and they don't realize that the federal definition, if the ban were to go into place, could supersede and kind of wipe out their existing programs. And not necessarily because the state can't figure out a way or doesn't want to fight back. The state might want to keep that infrastructure in place. The problem is with wholesalers, for example, they've got federal licenses. And so if they're violating their federal license, they could lose that. And that impacts the rest of their business, which is not solely dependent on hemp-derived THC beverages. You have, ancillary services like banking and credit card processing that technically can't process the sale of a Schedule I drug, which is what happens if this ban goes into place. Anything over that 0.4 milligrams of THC per container becomes Schedule I. So we have ancillary services as well as supply chain issues and manufacturing challenges that make it very difficult for us to operate. So the state associations might not always be aware of the additional ancillary issues that come with this ban going into place. It is very difficult to operate on the marijuana side of this industry. And I think anyone who's done that understands how difficult it is, from the taxation to the track and trace programs to this patchwork regulation that we have. It's very, very difficult. And so for some groups who might think, oh, well, we have state regulations, we're in the clear, we need to make sure they understand how their state policy is going to be impacted by that federal policy. And on that note, I will throw in there that what we have noticed over the last couple months is that wholesalers in particular have incredible political capital that they haven't necessarily had to tap into at the federal level. They work obviously through WSWA, NBWA, other wholesaler groups. We have the Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation as well, activating on our behalf. But most of the work that they've done has been very focused on the state level. As a result, they have very good relationships with their state representatives. Some of these groups are third, fourth generation, very similar to how farmers are generational. So as a result, they have longstanding relationships. They have been able to tap in and directly impact policy changes, as well as how some votes are swayed. Not saying that they are a shoo-in and they always get it done. We need it. This is all hands on deck for sure, but it's important that we understand how our partners can help us, because I think when you're a new industry, and in this case, I'm speaking very much to some of the hemp brands, sometimes I think we feel a little bit helpless because we are newer to this. We are a new emerging industry. Some of us have political backgrounds, some of us don't. And we kind of feel like we're sitting on our hands sometimes. The best thing we can do when we feel like we don't necessarily have the influence that we are hoping to have in the future is to leverage and educate our partners and become good partners to them so they can educate effectively and share accurate information, data, whatever it might be. Walking in the room with them and helping them better advocate for our category is incredibly beneficial. And so don't feel like you are helpless. It's about tapping into your partners. Because I get a lot of people reaching out to me saying, what can I do? I don't have relationships. I don't have this, that, and the other. It's talking to your state associations, talking to your wholesalers, talking to your retailers, making sure they're engaged, and also tapping into, your investors and different partners in your company, because many times you'll kind of stumble upon, my cousin is neighbors with Congressman such and such. That happens all the time. All the time. You'd be surprised. But it does happen. And as a result, we need to continue advocating. We need to continue tapping into our resources and thinking about how we can better leverage our relationships. And many of you have done that so well over the last couple months. And again, why we're having the momentum that we have right now. One thing I do want to call out is while hemp is a hot item on the Hill, hemp fatigue is real. Man, they heard a lot from us over the last couple months, and lots of that was some really, really good work. But it is important that we really try to streamline communications and communicate with each other, and all of the associations, as well as others that aren't necessarily featured on this gear here on the screen, are collaborating together so we can not hit one member of Congress with 50 emails all asking for the same thing. That's different than the grassroots strategy. Grassroots letters are very important and we want volume there, but we don't need necessarily every lobbyist reaching out to echo something. Maybe it's one lobbyist saying, hey, I'm working with CABA, HBA, ABL, WSWA, Total Wine, and this is what we're advocating for. Can we have a conversation about X, Y, and Z? That can oftentimes be a lot more helpful than that staffer getting, being reached out to by 50 different lobbyists, all slightly talking maybe in a different, maybe delivering the same message, but slightly differently. Coordination is key. And the amount of sharing, when I talked about all those text messages and calls, the amount of sharing that's happening amongst these groups is amazing. So everyone should feel really, really good about the fact that the beverage industry collectively is working extremely closely together and working very efficiently. Again, why I feel so confident and felt so good about the win that we've just had. There were a lot of industry statements, consumer letters. There will be more industry statements, particularly because we did obviously have legislation introduced shortly after the Senate CR. We will talk a lot more about that shortly. But it is important that we continue to drive home the same narrative, which is dedication to regulation and then pointing to solutions. And standalone bills, extension options being introduced are all going to be critical, but we are going to talk about kind of what the next steps are and what to expect along the way. So we are here. Step one. To be fair, a lot of these steps overlap with each other, so we're a little further along maybe. But step one was securing the extension. And again, this is a 30-day extension from November 12th, moving it to December 11th. We are hearing really great feedback in terms of the potential that we will have when the House comes back in September of that being moved forward, so we can continue focusing on getting showing dedication to regulation, getting co-sponsors for bills, and then pushing for sensible regulation versus just continuously asking for an extension. There is a negative connotation to the word extension, and it's because people think of kicking the can down the road. The other part, and if you watched the testimony during the CR vote, Klobuchar, who at 3:30 in the morning looked bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I can tell you right now I did not look that way, spoke so eloquently about the extension and had to continuously remind other members that this extension bans synthetics. When people hear extension, they think status quo. And when they think status quo, they think of those posters that Senator Budd and we've seen McConnell hold up in the past. So it's important that when we continue to point to legislation, that potentially we position it differently and we make sure that it has teeth in there that provides the guardrails to clean up the marketplace. Because we do need to address the concerns of Congress. To get champions, to get support, we need to clean up the marketplace. We need to provide legislation and language that provides definitions that talk about what are synthetics, since we know synthetics has kind of been this demonized word. But we also have to make compromises. And the way to do that is proving that you are an adult in the room, willing to work with them, willing to compromise, but also willing to educate and address those issues and say, we hear you and we want to address that too. And here's how. So for step number one, secure the extension. We are obviously in progress there. A lot of activity being talked about for DC in September. We are hearing a lot of positive things, but I know that there are still fly-ins and meetings being coordinated amongst different groups to make sure that we continue to see that extension secured. There will be fundraisers. You will hear a lot of things from your various associations, and keep those keep engaged with your association, because they will help guide you into how you can continue to see support and how we can continue to see wins. Step 2, the dedication to legislation. Van Dyne and Landsman introduced, 2 Mondays ago now, right after the CR vote, they introduced the Beverage Regulatory Parity Act, which talks about the parity between alcohol legislation and regulation, and how hemp beverages should be integrated into that. Barr and Craig introduced their bill, the Lawful Hemp Protection Act. Sheehy and Klobuchar are expected to introduce similar legislation, a complementary bill, if you will. There's been a lot of discussion around that publicly. And then, of course, there's the CMS program development, which we obviously advocate for, and we believe that senior citizens and, patients that want prescription medication with access to cannabinoid-based therapeutic products should be able to have access to those and be reimbursed by those. And understanding what the administration wants to see with that program will be critical, which is why Van Dyne and Landsman's bill, I think, has been designed to be complementary and something that can be paired with other legislation based on the feedback that we get from the administration, as well as Congress as a whole. Not only do we have to show dedication to legislation, we have to help them get co-sponsors and support. So there will be a lot of focus on that leading up to December, assuming we get that extension to December, because that's when we would like to see either movement on a standalone bill, meaning it's attached to, another must-pass bill like the end-of-year funding package, or we start hearing from Congress that they are interested in putting together what I'm referring to as kind of bridge legislation. So not necessarily the final destination, but a starting point for cleaning up the marketplace, setting some guardrails that might include certain permitted form factors, that might include dosage caps, that will probably include things like US grown hemp or naturally derived cannabinoids only. There are a lot of factors that might be included there, but ultimately we know that whatever is to get traction is going to be something that has teeth, that isn't just the status quo clean extension that we've heard of in the past. We will be navigating political challenges. We know that not everyone we talk with on a regular basis is in support of what we are advocating for. Meeting them in the middle, the same way we meet Congress in the middle, is important. So we are having conversations with alcohol suppliers, with marijuana groups, MSOs, some of the associations that have in the past lobbied against us. It's worth having the conversation. I think a lot of us on these calls, a lot of people on this call are business people. They say, always take the meeting. This is an opportunity to take a meeting. You might not agree, but you might be able to find common ground that reduces opposition and creates pathways that can support potentially both industries or both parties' interests. And that needs to be really critical. We will continue focusing on state-by-state strategy, education of associations, and making sure that each state has an understanding as to how the federal landscape will impact how they operate moving forward. And then step 5, the December end of year funding package. This is what a lot of us have identified as our pathway of attaching legislation to, whether it is a complete comprehensive bill or something like a bridge legislation with teeth, which there's been a lot of conversation about different members being interested in creating that based on legislation they've drafted in the past. Those are things that we are actively engaged on already to make sure that we have options, because if you work in cannabis, hemp or marijuana, and you don't have a plan B, you might not have a plan A, because plan B and plan C kind of come with the territory in this industry. You always have to be prepared to pivot. So just like that, we are preparing as well to have multiple options that, again, meet Congress as well as some of our maybe political challenges in the middle. Developing that strategy. We can't share everything publicly, like I said in the beginning of the call, but we are going to identify opportunity and leverage strengths. This map here shows the Senate vote. It visually seems very confusing at first. And if you are a member of CABA, we've been sending the interactive link out as well, where you can hover over each state and see how your members of Congress and your senators voted on this particular issue. There were some surprises in here, particularly looking at states, like Tennessee, that have a very robust regulatory structure where hemp-derived THC beverages are overseen by Tennessee ABC and regulated and taxed like alcohol, and yet they did not vote in our favor. So there's work to be done, and there's education that needs to be had. And again, this comes down to leveraging the wholesalers, retailers, state associations. I listed a number of those categories that we can be working with. Package store, which are the liquor stores, convenience, grocery, depending on your state, hospitality, restaurants, and entertainment might be very much engaged in this category. I know a lot of the brands on this call have been actively sponsoring music festivals and different events in their communities. Those groups need to know how this impacts their business. Veterans and farmers. One thing that we try to do, because we are the beverage category, is we really try to make sure that we don't try to hide behind other claims that other categories or other groups can make. We know that the farmers sell a variety of products to a variety of different form factors, and they might have a different stance than how beverage does. As a result, we support a lot of what the farmers advocate for, and we understand that to some degree, some of the things that we might ask for might not necessarily align entirely with the farmers, and that's okay. Ultimately, it's about making sure everyone is engaged and at the table, and that they're not being left at home. We will continue supporting our different partners in this space at the state level as well as the federal level. VFW sent an incredible letter in support of regulating hemp because of their constituents and their members. Those sorts of things will always be things that we support, and we want people to have safe access. I think most of this industry is rooted in people wanting consumers to be adults, to be able to make adult decisions and have safe access to safe products. Grassroots matter. We will continue this over and over and over again. As I mentioned, when we were talking about the Senate CR and just asking for them to include the extension legislation, multiple groups were being asked, hey, does beverage have legislation that's going to be coming out? I'm really comfortable with beverage. People can wrap their mind around adult beverages. We've had this conversation many times before. We are much more normalized than some of the other form factors when it comes to intoxicating hemp. But it was amazing at how many people had already come around to the idea of how we should be regulated because they are familiar and they were hearing from constituents. They want to make their constituents happy because they don't get reelected. They don't get the votes if they don't have constituents happy with their decisions. So we will continue to support our variety of partners. We ask that you do the same. Feel free to connect your state associations with the federal and national associations you work with, that there might be collaboration and opportunities to tag team conversations. So don't feel like they have to be separate. They're very much working together right now. And if you have an association that's looking for support, whether it's to educate their own members or to help provide data for their members during August recess when they're having meetings with different members of Congress in district, we are happy to assist there. And whether it's CABA or other associations, it's kind of the more the merrier at this very moment. Challenges and opposition. So I referenced this earlier. While we did have a number of wins, we obviously also had opponents, right? We saw the letter. Every year there's a letter from attorneys general that says that, hey, we need to shut this down. We need to keep the hemp ban in place. This year there were 35 attorneys general that signed that letter. Ironically, 5 of those also signed a letter that supported regulation of low-dose hemp-derived THC beverages. So there's a little bit of overlap there. And I think ultimately it comes down to what we're pointing out here, which is a screenshot from Senator Budd's testimony on this issue, where he's talking about these products that he wants to see go away because they're marketed to kids. We want to see that stuff go away too. So we just need to continue to be loud about what we stand for and what we are against. Closing the loophole is prohibition. That has been resonating very, very loud on the Hill. No one wants to be associated with prohibition because it is a long-standing history of not being effective, whether it's about alcohol or other medications and products out there. Safe regulation and sensible regulation is what protects the consumers and is most successful. So we need to make sure that it is heard loud and clear that closing the loophole is creating an unsafe, untested illicit markets, and it is prohibition. It will remove the good actors from the market and not create a system that helps with enforcement to clean up the marketplace. So we need to make sure that that is heard loud and clear. And that messaging is being heard from my meetings that I'm having on the Hill. We also need to make sure that people understand how their states are regulating these products. Congressmen have a lot of things to focus on. There's a lot of issues in the world. There's a lot of high priority issues. Hemp doesn't always rank in their top 10. It might be, top 5, but if the top list that they get to during September is only 3 deep and we're number 5, that's problematic for us. We need to make sure that they understand how important this is to their states that are already regulating and have taxation that they're collecting. What is that taxation funding? Is it education? Is it mental health programs? These are things that are helping their community. Is it helping with the enforcement? Because we do hear a lot from law enforcement saying we need to be able to clean up the marketplace. Well, the best way to do that is to put parameters in place and to do research on impairment studies so we can actually support methods for them to enforce safe regulation and, to have true parity between alcohol and low dose THC beverage. So there's a lot of different things that we need to make sure that they understand we are supportive of and that we understand their concern, but also highlighting that some states are already taking this into their own hands and having success with it. Keeping the momentum high. Right after the August 8th Senate CR vote, August 10th, that following Monday, we had the Beverage Regulatory Parity Act introduced by Congresswoman Van Dyne with co-sponsor Congressman Landsman. Van Dyne is out of Texas, Republican out of Texas. She is on Ways and Means Committee. Congressman Landsman is a Democrat out of Ohio and on the Energy and Commerce Committee. These are two key committees because they oversee a lot of the taxation and regulation that the alcohol industry has to pass through. So there is a understanding and kind of clear pathway forward for legislation to move through those groups. But it came right after this introduction. So again, right after the Senate CR vote. So keeping the momentum really moving. The bill contents, and this is the most recent draft, there's still time to make adjustments to bills. Bills after they are formally introduced have adjustments made all the time. So, this is done to be intentionally flexible, as I mentioned earlier, to be paired with other legislation. It does not include CMS language. It is designed to truly focus on how beverage should be regulated, which, if you look at other legislation that's been introduced, tracks. Beverage is asking for 3-tier system infrastructure with certain restrictions that maybe other parts of the hemp industry are not advocating for. That's okay. But this gives a very clear directive that we want to see parity between the alcohol industry and the THC beverage industry. Again, treating these two as what they are, adult beverages. Taxation, 8 cents per milligram of D9 THC. Naturally derived, 5 milligrams per serving. It allowed for 12-ounce containers and 750 milliliter multi-serving products. It does give a nod to TTB regulation as well as trade practice laws. And there is a research component as well as some work in progress definitions in there. Again, there's a lot of things that we have flagged that would be beneficial from a regulatory standpoint, such as chain of custody management versus work in progress percentage, transition periods. But ultimately, this is the closest thing we have seen to the Federal Alcohol Administration Act in terms of really creating parity between the two industries. So we are very supportive of this legislation while still working with Congresswoman Van Dyne and Congressman Landsman on consistently improving. And again, progress over perfection. There will always be room for improvement when it comes to regulation. Just ask any of the other associations that have been around for decades advocating for various things. There's always something to improve upon. And I do want to call out, because I did see a hand get raised. At the end, I will address any questions. I try to get through as much of the presentation as I can before I jump into that. But if you have any questions, please throw them in the Q&A section or in the chat. I will get to those and get to as many as I can at the end of this presentation. I also like to call out, and this I think is particularly relevant this week, because there was an op-ed that was written by Dawson Hobbs, who's head of federal and state government affairs at the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, where he talked a lot about a regulatory structure for THC beverage and why this should be gaining support from the cannabis sector. One thing that I think a lot of people forget, because we saw the big boom of low dose THC beverage grow because of hemp, THC beverage was born in cannabis, in the marijuana system, in dispensaries. The original THC beverage, as far as I know, was Keef out of Colorado, and that's like 15 years old now, I believe, which again, I mean, it's a teenager now, but it originated in the dispensary channel. What we learned from our experience in the dispensary channel, and I worked in the dispensary channel, when I first entered this space nearly 8 years ago, low dose appeals to a very different target demographic. And we have data that shows that those products, and when I say low dose, in this case, because of the data I'm referring to, under 10 milligrams per container, was less than 1% of the cannabis marketplace. THC beverage as a whole in the dispensary channel was less than 5% of the cannabis market. It took up a lot of space, it was thin margin, and we wanted things like refrigerators for beverages. And dispensaries looked at us like, we don't have room for that. Now, some have adjusted. I have definitely been in dispensaries that have refrigerators, but the top performing products in most of those markets are high dose products and a very different consumer than the 30 to 45-year-old soccer mom and the 55 plus senior citizen that we are seeing purchasing these products at Total Wine, or Specs, or Target for that matter. Low dose beverages are not competing with the dispensary channel. It's complementing it. We have always believed that we are introducing and normalizing THC to the everyday consumer. We are still coming out of prohibition. THC is still demonized by many. I went through the DARE program, so I know how they positioned marijuana and cannabis and THC. And obviously we know that's different now, but there's still a lot of people we need to educate. And I think understanding how the low dose beverage channel originally attempted to operate within the dispensary channel unsuccessfully because of where it was placed and who it was put in front of is important to telling the story. And I think what Dawson Hobbs particularly highlighted in his op-ed is the fact that the current cannabis regulatory market is not something that I think many of us would deem super successful. Within our own industry, the cannabis industry has criticized the infrastructures that have been built in multiple states. Some of these states have extremely high illicit markets because they're overly regulated and overly taxed. So when we are asking for a regulatory structure that has been effective at regulating other intoxicating products, includes taxation, includes safe access, age gating, label standards, testing standards, all of those components, why would we push against that? And obviously, I know that it's easier said than done. I know that there's obviously competing business opportunities and reasons for people to have a stance that they have. And I understand that. And I know it's really hard to operate in the marijuana industry. It is incredibly difficult, from the taxation to the regulations you have to abide by. I understand it. But this can change the foundation in which the entire cannabis industry grows. So if you haven't checked it out, Dawson Hobbs' op-ed, in Marijuana Moment, he's with Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. I highly recommend you take a read. We can't regulate away demand, but we can create safe access through regulation. And that is what we are leaning into with a lot of the regulation that we are introducing and supporting right now. I get a lot of questions on what people can do right now. And August recess, as I said, no recess for us. There's a lot of things we can do. One, thank your congressional allies. If they voted in your favor and you had conversations with them and you sent them letters, reach out, thank them for their support, encourage them to support us with future regulation that they will see introduced that puts sensible regulation in place for safe access. People are still engaging with House leadership. We're hearing great feedback, and that we anticipate that the extension to December 11th will move forward, but we are still encouraging people to engage with House leadership during August recess to reinforce that extension in the CR. There are advocacy tools you can use. Leverage those. We have a number of tools. We're actually updating those now, and we're going to be sending an e-blast out to all CABA members to have access. We do not limit who can have access to those. So if anyone who is not a member is looking for a one sheet on beverage regulation, we are developing tools on a regular basis, and we are happy to share those, because any support we can get and any conversation where we can create those tools is helpful to us in this particular fight at this moment. We will continue to do that. So look for advocacy tools. HBA has tools, WSWA has tools, CABA has tools. There's many, many groups. So if you're working with an association, tap into them, ask what's available. And if you're looking for something specific, because we are looking at developing some state level specific tools to get certain members of Congress on board, by all means, let us know. We will try to pull together as much information as we can to create those assets for you. Activating your networks. I talked about this quite a bit earlier. Associations, retailers, wholesalers, making sure that they understand the importance of their voice and the power that they have is incredibly valuable. If they need assistance, or they are looking for tools or information, or they want to talk to other associations about what our conversations have been like already with their member of Congress, we are happy to connect with them and have and even join some of their calls if they are interested in having additional support. Oftentimes it can be better when someone with a personal relationship has those conversations without external parties involved. We leave that to you to kind of read the room and tell us how we can support. But we are going to continue as associations reaching out and building our rapport and relationships with various members of Congress as well. And then keep all your partners informed and engaged. This goes to everyone you are working with, even your consumers to a degree. Those letters on the Hill that were the grassroots efforts from the WSWA or the Total Wine campaign or the NACS campaign, those were incredibly beneficial. And the more we have in-store displays at retail where these products are being sold, the more awareness constituents have that these products could go away, and they will become more vocal. We have gotten feedback from some groups within the hemp industry that our message of Save Hemp Bevs should be more broad, and it should be Save Hemp. I personally feel that the best way to engage a consumer is to specifically call out the product that they love and tell them that could go away. When I hear Save Hemp, that can be a multitude of things. That could be hemp heart cereal, which would like to save that too. But if I don't consume hemp heart cereal, am I going to send that letter? Am I going to feel that urgency? No, not necessarily. But if you're going to take my can or my Nowadays, or my Keef away, and I'm not going to be able to get it, that's a different story, because that's something I consume and I purchase from that retail location in that moment. It's something that matters to my day to day. And I think when we talk about the 30 to 45-year-old female and the 55 plus consumer that represent the top two growing demographics for our category, they want to respond and engage with things that impact them directly. They don't have time to fight all of the battles of the world, so we need to be very specific with our messaging. So whether it is Save Hemp Beverage or Save THC Beverage, whatever works in your market for engaging your consumer is critical. What we make sure of is that on the back end, the letter that goes to Congress references hemp, because sometimes there is confusion between what's going on with hemp and then what's going on with rescheduling, which is obviously marijuana, and very different channels for how those are regulated. Discussion topics and facts. These are some key talking points that are included in our assets, and I wanted to make sure that people had access to this information. So we have created that, our core messaging is we want to be taxed and we want to be regulated. We need more time. That is the message for the current CR ask. In terms of the regulatory framework, we like to point out some other things that I think are important for people to understand, because as I mentioned, Congress people have a lot of things to work on. They don't necessarily know what the three-tier system is. And they might nod their head, they've heard it before, but they might not understand how it operates. They might not understand how big the hemp industry is in their market. There's a lot of things that we can get more granular on. So when it comes to the regulatory framework, we highly recommend that wholesalers and retailers talk about the checks and balances that come within that framework, reminding them that the alcohol regulatory framework in the United States is the safest in the world. We do not have a counterfeit alcohol problem here. other countries absolutely do. So highlighting the fact that the checks and balances that we have in our current alcohol regulatory framework have worked at keeping counterfeit product out of the market. If they're looking to clean up intoxicating hemp, this would be a great way to do it. The infrastructure that's already proven it can do that. The other thing I like to point out is 86% of consumers support treating hemp like alcohol. That's huge when it comes to like constituents saying, we trust that system. We already buy alcohol. We already buy these products that are sold through this infrastructure. We trust it. We trust the FDA understands the ingredients and the manufacturing best practices. We trust that the TTB is handling the tax collection and the wholesalers are verifying the source material, the testing, the born on date, all of those things in advance. That is what the constituent is saying when it votes on things like that. And that number, which is not on the screen, and I should have highlighted it, but it is on our one sheet, came from the Center for Alcohol Policy group that did a survey last year and had consumers vote on how they wanted to see regulation for hemp. Potential tax revenue. This is a big one. We have a lot of programs at the state and federal level that people would like to fund. And we need dollars to do that. This is an opportunity, particularly when we are seeing alcohol sales go down and therefore the tax revenue from alcohol sales go down. This is an opportunity for there to be healthy taxation that can fund these other programs. It can also help fund enforcement, which, as we've mentioned, is a key critical component to what we're hearing from law enforcement when they send their letters to the Hill, whether that's at the state or federal level. Every regulated state that has seen a net new tax revenue without increase has seen no increase, I should say, to risk in society. So like Minnesota, when they first legalized intoxicating hemp products, they did not see an increase in crime. They did not see an increase in DWIs or DUIs or driving under the influence. They did not see increase in domestic violence. As a result, the sky didn't fall down, right? So we should be looking at how we can improve upon these regulations to make them even better, but obviously, eliminate that fear factor of the sky is falling if these products are still in the market. And again, pushing away from the prohibition, close the loophole narrative. Jobs and economic impact. Haifa had promoted that 450,000 jobs had been directly associated with hemp. If you look at the ancillary services and companies that are working alongside hemp and hemp beverage, we're talking about warehousing, we're talking about distributors, we're talking about marketing, banking, insurance companies, hospitality. We could be talking about millions of jobs across ancillary services. And it's important that they zoom out a little bit and have that understanding that other ancillary services and industries have built new departments, have maintained or grown their company because of the hemp foundation that was laid in 2018. So the zooming out piece is really important because when they look at it as just being hemp, it's significantly smaller than if it's all of the industries it touches. Public safety. Like I mentioned earlier, prohibition doesn't work. It creates an illicit market. We know this. It's done this in the past. And as a result, we need to continue to kind of hammer home that point. The assets that we created have kind of a prettier diagram of this data, but this is a critical component and we are happy to make that available to anyone who needs it. If you guys have questions or other data points that you come across as you are talking to different states or different associations that might be collecting state-specific data, please feel free to share that. We're happy to update our assets so that people have the most recent data as well. Whoa. Sorry, guys. There we go. More discussion topics and facts. Consumer demand. Obviously, we know that there's varying rules, but right now we have product being kind of sold and distributed approximately through 28 states. There's gray area in some states, so that number tends to vary depending on who you talk to, but there's varying rule, 28 states that we have brands selling in. The number one product that's purchased alongside hemp beverages is Pinot Grigio, which is not the number one thing that comes to mind for a lot of these people when they think of hemp or cannabis or hemp beverages, and the largest demographics. I make the joke all the time, and I will continue to make it, but anyone who knows a female between the ages of 30 to 45. If you've ever tried to take something away from her that she really likes, it doesn't go well. We're very vocal at this age. We don't want our favorite products being taken away from us. Neither do senior citizens who have the right to have access to whatever they want, as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's safely manufactured, distributed, and sold. So as a result, talking about who our target demographic is changes the demo that they envision in their mind. I always highlight a couple of these states on the right-hand side, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, as 3 states that have regulatory infrastructures that are very similar to alcohol that's being introduced. I wouldn't say any of them have it quote unquote perfect, but that's okay. It's a starting point and they'll continue to improve upon those. We've seen Connecticut, Tennessee, and a handful of other states continue to improve upon their regulations, even increasing things like dosage cap and where these products can be sold, because again, the sky didn't fall when they made them accessible. Industry support, highlighting the fact that this has bipartisan support. The bills being introduced have Republicans and Democrats. They are in the House and the Senate. They have everyone from farmers to retailers to hospitality. We have a very large group of support getting behind sensible regulation here. And that's only continued to grow and it's becoming more evident, which is again why hemp has continued to be a hot topic on the Hill. Latest public support for hemp beverage that I like to call out and make sure everyone's aware of. The 7 state AGs that signed the letter basically saying that they supported sensible regulation similar to alcohol for low-dose hemp-derived THC beverages. And then the National Restaurant Association formally supporting hemp beverage regulation. The National Restaurant Association has a number of stats and facts that they have shared in their press releases about how and why they are supportive of this. But one of the biggest stats from, I believe it was last year, 42% of their members reported having no profit in that year. Most restaurants and many hospitality groups will say that their profit, over 50% of it, comes from adult beverages. And if people are drinking less alcohol and staying at the bars or restaurants less, or drinking Diet Coke, which I am guilty of on occasion, it impacts their bottom line. And so they are looking for other options. And this is an option that can be safely sold to adults, properly age gated, and make up for the deficit that they are seeing. The other part of this that is becoming much more evident, and definitely something that I would say many members on the Hill are very aware of, is the fact that GLP-1s are becoming much more prevalent. And there are many people that I've spoken to have someone in their inner circle that's on a GLP-1, and they are therefore being told, oh, I don't drink as much anymore, or oh, I can't drink as much anymore. Or they're switching their drinking behavior in terms of which adult beverages they want. That is a critical component because the GLP-1 trend isn't likely to go away. It's only likely to become probably more accessible. And I believe the data is showing that 1 in 10 consumers is being prescribed GLP-1. And that's not including people who are getting GLP-1s that aren't necessarily getting a prescription for it or using it for other purposes. So it is important that, we keep all of these facts in mind because consumer behavior choices are being impacted by other things, not just the fact that hemp beverages are accessible. And then the other thing I'm pointing out is DC time in September. I want everyone to be aware that it is important that everyone knows that there will be a ton of full court press in September. Even if the CR gets passed very early on in the month because they are eager to get to refocus their attention on the election, there will be critical meetings that happen because we are still pressed for time looking at December 11th as the next deadline for us to beat, right? So there will still be a lot of conversation. I definitely recommend that people kind of prepare to have, to be supporting or be engaged with their association and take directive from them in terms of how they should be engaged in DC or supporting from afar. I'm a firm believer that not everybody has to come to DC to have an impact on DC. Many of these members will take meetings virtually, particularly if you are a constituent. In-person meetings are certainly helpful. There's body language. There's all sorts of different things that I think can impact a meeting. Plus walking in with a wholesale partner, a retail partner can definitely create a different atmosphere. But there's plenty of ways different groups can support from afar. So please keep that in mind. Do not think that if you can't make it to DC in September, that your efforts aren't valuable. They can be incredibly impactful even from afar. Assets and tools. I'm not going to dive all into this, but these are some screenshots of some of the things that we've engaged. We have a congressional guide that we created for people who are having in-district meetings during August. We've also created an overview in one sheet of what Beverage is asking for. We are creating kind of some updated ones that go more specifically into the Van Dyne legislation. But oftentimes right now, the conversations are a little bit more high level, just having them understand that the bill exists, what the key components and what it eliminates in the marketplace, how it helps address their concerns. Those conversations are critical. So we will continue to develop these tools and improve upon them based on the conversations that we're having on the Hill. Going into our timeline, I always love bringing up this slide, and I get to keep moving the "we are here" drop, if you will. So here we are mid-August, right? One thing I do want to talk about right now is kind of what we're hearing from brands. A lot of our members are talking about how while we have the 30-day extension, it doesn't provide, obviously, the long-term stability for us to feel comfortable doing another production run. Wholesalers and retailers are watching their inventory more. So some of the cash flow concerns that we might have thought would hit later in the year, I've hit a little bit earlier. And if you are experiencing that, there's other people with you experiencing that. You are not the only one. So these are things we are cognizant of. These are things we are bringing up in our conversations, that because we don't have clarity, it's putting companies and businesses in a tough spot. We know this from last year. If we don't have clarity coming up, by the end of the year, farmers start getting real anxious about what they're planting. So there's a number of factors that go along with this timeline. Obviously, our goal is to get that November 12th date to be moved to December 11th. And I do believe that we are on the right track to having success there, but we will continue pushing. And hopefully in September, I get to present and have an updated timeline that has that, November 12th date kind of moved out. We're going to jump into some of the market stuff that I want to talk on. As much as we just talked about the fact that there is some drop off from wholesalers and retailers on volume, or I should say inventory, product is still selling, and it's selling well. We are still seeing continued growth. We are still hearing from wholesalers and retailers that this category is growing for them and they don't want to see it going away. It's making them more vocal about this when talking to members of Congress and talking to their leadership about becoming more vocal with their state and federal advocacy efforts, because they're flagging it now as a concern that if this category goes away, they will either have to explore layoffs or, what are they going to fill the shelves with? And if you talk to different retailers, they'll tell you their job is to put on the shelf what consumers want. Consumers want this. We don't need to convince the retailers anymore that consumers want these. They know that. What we need to do is convince Congress that these can be safely regulated and literally create an act of Congress. So we will continue showing them improved data. There are a number of reports and things that are now out publicly, one of which is the new hemp beverage data that HBA created alongside VAP. It collects data through wholesalers and distribution, so it does include on-premise consumption like hospitality, as well as through traditional retail. They did 26 suppliers were represented. So it isn't the entire industry. So this represents the floor, not the ceiling. But the QR code on the right-hand side, if you scan that, it will take you to the report so you can look at purchasing the complete report. This is kind of their key findings summary that they've highlighted, for everybody. So if you're interested in getting more data, reach out, take a look at that report, decide if that makes sense for you guys. And a lot of interesting insights. One of my favorite insights is showing that lower dose products continue to grow, because my biggest fear is that low dose products don't continue to stay on the shelf, because we see volume with the higher dose products, or that's where we've seen the most growth, I should say, or correction. We have seen traditionally the highest dose products in any market be the ones that move in volume. However, when we are talking about the 30 to 45-year-old female, the 55 plus consumer who is maybe being reintroduced to THC or trying this for the first time, they're going to start with a 2 or 3 milligram beverage. 5 could be too much for them to start with. So I'm excited that we're seeing lower dose products continue to grow, because it means we're not missing onboarding potential consumers. All form factors are growing. Every single one. Large format and 12 ounce are the largest categories, and that's why they are prioritized in the Beth Van Dyne bill, the Beverage Regulatory Parity Act. But as a result, there are still things that we are seeing growth in, like the small easy snap form factors. Those would be things I would love to not see go away. And that's why that bill in particular highlights the fact that TTB can define new form factors and allow for small format, whether that's the 2-ounce shots or the easy snap formats, which again are some of my favorites because as a female with a purse, I have room for those. I don't always have room for a 6-pack or, a 750 milliliter bottle. But don't sleep on the lower dose. I think that's the other trend, like I said, that came from some of the data that the HBA released, is that the low dose products are now starting to see more traction. So it's worth including that in your portfolio as you continue to kind of plan out what you are doing. We are having conversations with brands who are talking about the fact that they are looking at doing 0.4 milligram beverages in preparation for the ban to potentially take place. There's a lot of mixed feelings about whether or not there's demand for a product that's at that dosage. I'm a very low dose consumer. I would love to be able to have more than 2 beverages and, float, if you will, and just feel a certain way. I know that's not going to work for everybody, but is it being used as an interim gap, as a just in case? Yes. And I think that the one thing we need to be cognizant of is anything over 0.4 milligrams of THC per container is technically Schedule 1 drug. So that means 0.45 is technically a Schedule 1 drug. So the dosing and the accuracy and the manufacturability of those products, you're probably aiming actually a little lower because you're going from a federally legal product to something that is a Schedule 1 drug. Very different tax scheme. Wholesalers can't touch something that is Schedule 1. There's all sorts of different things to consider in that moment. But we continue to hit milestone after milestone. As I mentioned, and you guys who have been on this call before, I've seen a couple of these highlights. We continue to see beverages breaking down new doors. Target expands into new markets. Senorita has been working with the United Center. Rhythm partners with the Navy Pier. BevNet awards another THC beverage. Best new beverage in the Beverage Showdown contest. There's a lot of great things happening, and I think we continue to see these opportunities grow, and we're also starting to see these partners advocate for the health and sustainability of our industry, which is also helpful. Going back a little bit to that 0.4, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's really important to hammer home because, again, we have a lot of groups that are just not as familiar with how difficult it is to operate in the marijuana channel. State level approach is complicated. It's not wholesale retail friendly. States can try to keep their hemp markets alive if a ban is in place, but it is going to look very different than it does today. For example, I mentioned earlier, credit card processing, they can't be used to purchase a federally illegal product, a Schedule 1 drug. So what does that mean for groups like Total Wine, C-stores like Circle K that are carrying these products? They don't have room for a second cash wrap. They don't want to collect cash only. How does that work unless it's a 0.4 or under product, right? There's the tax penalty implications. Anyone who's worked on the marijuana side can tell you that 280E tax penalty that oftentimes has brands being taxed between 70 and 80% as a penalty tax, and also does not allow for deductions, like typical business deductions like rent, for example, from companies. It makes it extremely difficult to turn a profit and to continue to scale your business. Then there's supply chain issues. Does your state grow hemp? Can the hemp go across state lines? Once it's extracted, the potency for work in progress would be higher than that 0.4 per container. So there's a lot of questions about how this would be executed. So it's very important that we make it loud and clear at the state level with our state associations that the state regulations are not going to be enough to maintain the way the market looks today. Is it impossible? I'm never going to say it's impossible. I've also seen, states can change their regulation. Maybe they shift their hemp legislation to legalize marijuana. Some states might. Tennessee is a state that has kind of historically, we always kind of joke that it would be the last to legalize marijuana, but it has a thriving hemp market. Same with South Carolina. Now, they did not pass legislation for hemp, but legalizing marijuana wasn't something on their radar. So I think there's a lot of things to be considered. And it's important for any brands that are considering trying to stay open in certain key markets, leveraging either that 0.4 or working within a state program, understanding what that looks like and talking to the partners, legal teams in that marketplace to really understand what's possible and what's not. Talk to your emulsion provider, talk to your hemp supplier, talk to the raw material suppliers, talk to all of them, because they might all have different bits of feedback or challenges that you might not have thought of initially. Upcoming events, this is not a one size fits all. There are a lot of events that are coming up in October, and I'm sure a lot of people are contemplating whether or not they should be attending. But I did want to share kind of where CABA will be, regardless of what happens in September, as well as what we have planned for December, right? So next week, CABA will be on a panel at the Center for Alcohol Policy Conference in Minneapolis. If you're based in Minneapolis, hit your girl up. I'll be there for a couple of days. Would love to kind of explore our pioneer town, if you will, and share a THC beverage with you. We don't have those just at the bars in DC, so that's kind of a nice little retreat for me. September, CABA will be DC bound. Obviously, I'm based here, so I will be here holding down the fort. There might be opportunities where some members are asked to come into town, host, have meetings, work collectively with some of our other association partners. I know there's a number of fly-ins happening. CABA historically has not just done open fly-ins because it can be very difficult to corral and maintain the conversations. We've tended to be a little bit more focused, but now we have so many groups doing a variety of things that we're coordinating now with the groups to determine, okay, do we need to bring in certain people from this market, this state? So you might be getting some outreach from me if you are a member of CABA, or maybe another one of the associations, basically saying, please, we would love you to join us in DC for some of our meetings in September. We'll tell you going into October, where there's a number of industry events that I know a lot of people are contemplating whether or not they should be a part of, or still go, not knowing where we will be in December. CABA is going to be there, networking, educating, trying to activate and engage different groups. We will be at NACS, the National Association for Convenience Store. I will be presenting alongside Haley at Spinks, talking about the success that we've had and what we need to do to make sure that these products are still safe and legal at the federal level, but also that they are sold and able to be sold through the C-store channel, age-gated like other adult beverages. Following that, we have the national NBWA. So the National Beer Wholesalers Association has their annual convention and product showcase. I know there's a number of brands sponsoring and attending already. That will be in Orlando, Florida this year. Obviously, NACS is in Las Vegas, Law Vegas. As you know, my brain was on law already. Las Vegas. But we will be at that show as well. Happy to have conversations and answer any questions you guys might have if you're attending that show. Always good to maintain relationships with wholesalers and your retail partners. In general, I believe these relationships are going to pay off in the long run, whether we have a stutter step or not when it comes to federal regulation. But make sure have a plan going into it. Be cost effective. I know that there's a lot of people watching pennies right now. Maybe your entire team doesn't need to go like last year. These are things that constantly kind of considering. And then at the end of October, or towards the end of October, October 19th through the 20th, Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailer Association has their annual conference in Nashville. It's a great show. There were a lot of hemp-derived THC beverage brands this year. This is a state that really wants to keep their THC beverage program alive and well. And the Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailer Association has been a great champion of that. So myself, as well as a representative from WSWA, will be speaking at that show. If it's a market that you're active in, might be worth, exploring exhibiting. I know people are kind of hesitant. Definitely, I encourage reaching out and talking to them about what their pricing looks like, what their program looks like. They really want to encourage and maintain momentum with hemp. So have the conversation. Joyce I call her Sweet Joyce over at Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailer Association. She's your go-to gal. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to make an introduction. But if you reach out and you talk to Joyce, tell her Diana says hi. Last thing I'm going to highlight, pick a grassroots campaign. Scan, send, save, hemp, bevs. There are a lot of campaigns out right now. All of these QR codes will take you to a different platform to send a letter. At the end of the day, it's about volume. WSWA has their Save Hemp Beverages program. Call to action is basically saying regulate these like other adult beverages. Total Wine and More has their Protect THC Beverage Access in-store retail campaign with their assets. HBA has their voter voice, which they had customized the messaging to talk specifically about the Senate CR before. Don't Ban My Drink is another one that includes a straw poll for polling individuals and consumers as to whether or not they, want to see THC beverages remain legal. It also then backs into the WSWA campaign. They are particularly good at targeting and retargeting different consumers that take that poll. So it's a good opportunity if you're, it's one that you can share that keeps the messaging very green and evergreen. So it's not there's no brand specific. It doesn't necessarily highlight any one association. So definitely one you can work with. ABC Fine Wine and Spirits out of Florida created their own for Florida. They did see some spikes in a couple other states, but Florida is obviously where ABC is based. And then NACS, the National Association of Convenience Stores, has their action center as well. All of these work. Depends on who you are, where your brands are activated. But what I do ask is that if you are a supplier, you make sure your partners know that these options exist, because if they are a wholesaler, they can use the WSWA campaign. If they are a convenience store, they can use NACS. There's a variety of different ways. The Hemp Beverage Alliance is very flexible as well. But we'll continue, pushing on the grassroots end. Again, this is all about volume. At the end of the day, they kind of stack up these letters and say, whoa, this is an important thing. The reason I'm highlighting WSWAs is because they have ready to use assets. So if you don't want to customize your own design, you want something that's ready to print and send out, they do have all of their assets available in the bottom left-hand corner, this QR code. It is evergreen. The branding here is on the right, so you can see how it's set up. You can take their QR code and customize the design if you want. They have that QR code just ready and available for you. So definitely keep that in mind, but that's why I'm highlighting this one separate, because there are ready to print assets ready to go right now. And thank you to all of the brands doing this. I have seen an incredible amount of pictures being sent to me of these assets being used in store, as well as digital and eBlast. Can, I know, also did one of their own campaigns as well, using some of their investors. This is incredibly beneficial. And I do want to give a shout out to a handful, Can, Houseplant, leveraging their own internal teams and celebrity relationships to promote this campaign and get it in front of consumers. It's invaluable. This is exactly the sort of voice that we want to have, and we know that we have the love of the consumer, but being able to tap into that has been incredibly beneficial as well. The deadline of November 12th still stands as of right now, so please keep that in mind. December 11th is not the date until the House passes the Senate CR in September, or there's a back and forth, whatever that ends up looking like. So right now, you will still see me counting down until November 12th. But also keep in mind that we are down to less than 20 legislative days because of how they are operating in September. On that note, I'm going to jump into some questions and see what else you guys want to talk about while we're in here. And it looks like, for the most part, the messages I'm getting are not specific to questions. We are getting some questions about the Sheehy and Klobuchar Senate version introduction. That is expected in the near future. I know that there's been a lot of conversations around what that bill will look like and what the components will be, but there's been Sheehy and Klobuchar have been loud advocates, very much helping us behind the scenes, looking for regulation for hemp. And one thing I also want to call out, while we, yes, we support the CMS program development, our products would not be yes, they can participate in the CMS program, but that is not where we're necessarily looking for our products to be regulated. We are also not advocating that our products are health and wellness products. We are treating them like adult beverages. So when we're talking about what does legislation look like for our products, it does look very different than CMS. It does not mean we are not supportive of the CMS program. But the CMS program is also developing how they want to see their program developed, what that looks like. And that when that is formalized, you will see probably more formal support from a variety of groups, but how we want THC beverage to be regulated is different. And we really try hard to differentiate ourselves because we don't want to be accused of hiding behind the health and wellness veil, because that's not what our products ultimately are or how we advocate for them to be sold. And let me go into the Q&A section here. Yes, there's a lot of questions about copycat products and how they've been in the market for over 20 years. I think one of the big issues with the copycat products now is that they've actually gotten into mainstream retail because of the lack of regulation. So if we got the regulation in place, we would start seeing that get cleaned up through, again, the 3-tier system and the checks and balances that come into play there. We are getting a lot of questions about, in general, our stance on inhalables. So CABA has a statement that we have not seen any indicator that inhalables are favored by Congress in general. So CABA did put out a statement saying that we are supportive of banning inhalables, hemp inhalables, I should say, and banning synthetics, because that is the indicator that we are seeing and hearing from Congress. I don't know if all groups feel that way. I'm sure there are certain retail channels that would be more than happy to take inhalables as long as they're age gated and regulated appropriately. CABA currently is supportive of just focusing on products that we believe are palatable at the federal level. And so inhalables, we do not think, because of the CMS program and a handful of other things, will be favored. Let's see. All right. I'm going to leave it at that because I know there's a lot of questions about some of the other bills, and I do agree that there are a number of bills that have been introduced, and it can create confusion for Congress. Ultimately, there is a lot of behind the scene conversation between people that are actively supporting this. Like, for example, we've seen bills introduced by Griffith. We've seen bills introduced by Wyden in the past. There are behind the scenes conversations with all of these groups talking about how to, whether it's consolidate or adjust these bills to address the concerns or issues on the Hill. It can be looked at as sometimes as there being confusion. Ultimately, I think what's really happening is that people are trying to whittle down what has the palatability to move forward. And again, it just comes down to continued education and echoing different things on the Hill. I do think that there is a lot of room for improvement with some of these bills that have been introduced, and a lot of conversations that need to continue taking place. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. If there aren't any other questions, I will let you guys go. But thank you so much for attending. And if anyone has any specific questions that they didn't answer or that I didn't get to answer on this call, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can obviously see my email here. Yeah, I try to make myself available to you as best I can. So thank you guys for attending. Have a great rest of your day. And if you are a CABA member, please join our Monday call. We will be talking a little bit more about timelines and some strategy based on some conversations we've had this week. Thank you guys so much, and continue supporting your associations. Take they are in the room, continue getting their feedback and working cohesively together. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good day.